The judge has taken the bench. The first witness of the day has just taken the stand. DNA analyst Charlene Webster. Let's get you into the courtroom.
It didn't begin with gunshots. It didn't begin with screams. It began with silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong when it comes from a woman who never disappears. A missed appointment, no phone call, no message, just absence. And in a small town where people don't vanish without reason, that absence was enough to trigger fear. By the time police stepped inside the house on North Albert Drive in Enoch, Utah, the new year was already stained with something irreversible. 8 people were dead, not strangers, not intruders, a family, a mother, a grandmother, 5 children, the youngest barely old enough to understand what danger even was. This was not chaos. This was not panic. This was something colder. Because when investigators looked closer, they realized this massacre didn't happen suddenly. It wasn't an explosion of rage. It was the final chapter of a story that had been quietly writing itself for years, through police reports, ignored warnings, dismissed fear, and a system that chose convenience over protection. And as this story unfolds, you're going to see something far more terrifying than violence itself. You're going to see how clearly this could have been stopped. Enoch, Utah is the kind of place people describe as protected, a quiet city tucked into Iron County, surrounded by mountains and open land.
Authorities confirmed that 8 individuals belonging to the same family were found deceased inside the home. Emergency responders arrived after receiving a distress alert when contact with the family suddenly stopped. Officials have stated that there was no immediate evidence of external involvement, and investigations are ongoing to determine the sequence of events.
Hope stayed, the belief that maybe things would improve, that confrontation had scared him enough to change. That belief would cost 8 people their lives. The call didn't come in as an emergency. No one reported gunshots. No one reported screaming. No one reported violence. It was a welfare check, the kind police receive every day, a quiet request.
In one particularly disturbing incident,
Until January 4th, 2023. Because what happened inside that brick house shattered the illusion that faith, community, and familiarity are enough to protect anyone from violence growing behind closed doors. From the outside, the Hay family looked like the definition of stability. Tasha Hay was a mother of 5, educated, organized, reliable, someone who never missed appointments, never failed to show up, never vanished without explanation. She had earned a degree in child development and dedicated her life to raising her children. Her husband, Michael Hay, worked in insurance. They had been married for nearly 20 years.
his father's recent death and his brother's divorce. He painted himself as a man under pressure, a man dealing with grief, but he never once took responsibility. He never once acknowledged the fear his daughter had expressed. Tasha, when interviewed by investigators, told authorities she didn't want criminal charges filed against her husband. She hoped, she said, that the investigation itself would be a wake-up call for Michael. This is also textbook behavior for victims of domestic violence, because there was insufficient evidence to pursue criminal charges, likely based on an inability to prove each element of the case.
3 years earlier, police had already been inside that house, not for an argument, not for a misunderstanding, for a child. In August 2020, officers responded to a call reporting possible.
But here's the part that's even more troubling, the part that haunts everyone who has studied this case. No interviews or police reports from that investigation. Investigators simply warned Michael. They told him that the allegations against him were close to assaultive and that he should continue seeing somebody for his anger issues. They gave him a verbal warning and sent him on his way. And then they closed the case. Fast forward to December 2022. Tasha files for divorce. She tells family members that Michael has removed the guns from the house. She confides in friends that she's afraid. The divorce is also the reason why her mother comes to stay with her, to provide support, to be an extra set of eyes and hands during this dangerous transition period. Because leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time. Statistically, the risk of death increases exponentially when a victim tries to leave. Domestic violence experts will tell you this over and over. The moment of separation is when the abuser realizes they're losing control. And for someone like Michael, someone who had spent years controlling, manipulating, and terrorizing his family, Tasha and Macy attended a church event. They were seen by multiple witnesses. They seemed normal. But what was happening inside that home? What was Michael thinking? What was he planning? We'll never know for certain. But based on the timeline and the evidence, it appears that at some point, between the evening of January 3rd and the early morning hours of January 4th, Michael made the decision to kill his entire family. And when officers entered that home on January 4th, they found the devastating result of that decision. But a carefully planned execution. When forensic investigators examined Michael Haight's digital footprint, they discovered something chilling: internet search history that revealed the extent of his premeditation. This single question reveals the calculated nature of Michael's thinking. He wasn't asking out of curiosity. He was assessing risk. He was trying to determine whether the sound of gunfire would travel from his home to neighboring properties. The fact that he was concerned about neighbors hearing gunshots tells us several things. First, it confirms that he knew exactly what he was planning to do and how he was going to do it. Enoch homes typically sit on half-acre lots. The Haight residence on North Albert Drive was no exception. The distance between houses, combined with solid construction, Michael would have known this. He would have known that on a Wednesday morning in early January, when most neighbors were at work or going about their daily routines, the chances of anyone hearing gunshots from inside his home were minimal. The house kept its secrets until officers arrived for the welfare check hours later. But the disturbing searches didn't stop there. According to investigative reports, Michael had also researched firearm lethality. These searches suggest he wasn't just planning to shoot his family. He was planning to ensure they wouldn't survive, that there would be no chance of rescue.
Family looked like the definition of stability. Tasha Hay was a mother of 5, educated, organized, reliable, someone who never missed appointments, never failed to show up, never vanished without explanation. She had earned a degree in child development and dedicated her life to raising her children. Her husband, Michael Hay, worked in insurance. They had been married for nearly 20 years. They met while attending Southern Utah University, married young, built a family, and settled into what appeared to be a quiet, respectable life.
Michael had looked up information about how police trace digital evidence, how long it takes for authorities to respond to welfare checks in rural areas, and what investigators typically look for at crime scenes. Perhaps most disturbingly, investigators found searches about familicide itself. Michael had been reading about other family annihilators, studying their cases, examining the patterns. He knew what he was planning had a name. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a man who snapped in a moment of uncontrollable rage. This was deliberate, researched, planned down to the smallest logistical detail. The timeline makes the premeditation even clearer. Tasha filed for divorce on December 21, 2022. The murders occurred on January 4, 2023, but the search history suggests Michael had been thinking about this for longer than those 14 days. Some of the searches dated back further, raising the question, had the idea been forming even before Tasha filed for divorce? Or was the divorce filing the final trigger that transformed his violent fantasies into concrete plans? Experts who study family annihilators have identified a consistent psychological profile. These perpetrators typically view their families not as individual human beings with autonomy and rights. Rather than accept the reality that their family members have agency and can leave, they choose to destroy what they can no longer control. For Michael, who had spent years exerting control over every aspect of his family's life, so he made a choice. If he couldn't have his family the way he wanted them, no one would have them at all. The evidence of planning is important because it destroys any narrative that this was somehow an accident or a momentary lapse in judgment. It proves that Michael knew exactly what he was doing, had time to think about it, and chose to proceed anyway. And it raises yet another devastating question. If the system had acted differently in 2020, when Macy reported her father's abuse, would any of this planning have mattered? Would Michael have been under supervision? Would there have been restrictions on his access to firearms? Macy Haight did everything the system asked of her. She reported her father to authorities. She detailed the abuse she had suffered. The system responded with a warning to Michael and nothing more. No charges were filed. No case was forwarded to the district attorney's office for review.
What they found inside would follow them for...
And her grandmother. In the year since the murders, Enoch has struggled to heal. Vigils have been held to say goodbye to Tasha, Gail, and the 5 children.
No movement, no television, no sound of children.
Has held special services. Neighbors continued to leave flowers and
Through police reports, ignored warnings, dismissed fear, and a system that chose convenience over protection. And as this story unfolds, you're going to see something far more terrifying than violence itself. You're going to see how clearly this could have been stopped. Enoch, Utah is the kind of place people describe as protected, a quiet city tucked into Iron County, surrounded by mountains and open land. With a population hovering around 7,500, it's the sort of town where neighbors recognize each other's cars and children play outside without supervision.
But grief and community support, while important, don't answer the hard questions. Why weren't charges filed when a 14-year-old girl said her father choked her? These aren't rhetorical questions. They deserve answers. And more importantly, they demand action to ensure this doesn't happen again. Because the reality is this: domestic violence escalates. It doesn't improve on its own. Michael Haight exhibited every single one of these behaviors. They were documented in police reports. They were witnessed by his own daughter. People in the community suspected something was wrong. Your children don't have to suffer the fate that Macy, Briley, Sienna, Ammon, and Gavin suffered. There are people who will believe you. There are resources available. There are safe places you can go. And there are laws designed to protect you.
Nearly everyone shares the same faith, nearly everyone shares the same routines, and nearly everyone believes bad things happen somewhere else. Violent crime is rare. Murders are almost unheard of. People move here to escape danger, not encounter it. And for years, that belief went unchallenged until January 4th, 2023. Because what happened inside that brick house shattered the illusion that faith, community, and familiarity are enough to protect anyone from violence growing behind closed doors. From the outside, the Hay family looked like the definition of stability.
Just tears ran down their cheeks.
This is a crime so disturbing that even the jurors cried. It became one of the worst double family massacres to happen in less than a week, starting on a day meant for joy and celebration. January 1st, 2006. A Sunday afternoon in Richmond, Virginia. Firefighters were called to 3119 North Chesterfield Avenue, expecting a normal kitchen fire. But what they discovered in the basement was anything but normal. 4 bodies, a mother, a father, and their 2 young daughters, just 9 and 4 years old. Someone else did. The flames were set afterward, meant to hide the truth. Less than 48 hours later, another nightmare surfaced. A second family, killed in the same way. 3 more victims, tied up, tortured, and murdered inside their own home. Brian Tabo Harvey, 49, was a Richmond music legend. In the 1980s, he fronted the indie band House of Freaks. Even after the band dissolved, his friendship with drummer Johnny Hott remained strong. 2005, Brian played his final show. By 2006, Brian worked on computers for the Henrico County school system. I think you have to be hopeful about life when you have a child. You owe it to them. His wife, 39-year-old Catherine Grabinski, known as Kathy, co-owned World of Mirth. It's a wonderful place. Kathy was also an artist who painted theater sets, worked as a pastry chef, and devoted herself to her community. Their first daughter, Stella Ann, was born in 1996. Teachers described her as exceptionally bright and kind.
Her husband, Michael Hay, worked in insurance. They had been married for nearly 20 years. They met while attending Southern Utah University, married young, built a family, and settled into what appeared to be a quiet, respectable life.
Mary and Percy L. Tucker. The scheme was elaborate and cruel. Ashley would pretend to be a hostage, claiming she'd been kidnapped by Gray and Dandridge.
Quiet rhythm, a decision had already been made. This wasn't impulsive, it was resolved. On the evening of January 3rd, Tasha and Macy attended a church event. Witnesses later said nothing seemed wrong. No visible fear, no panic, no indication that this would be their last night alive. That's another brutal truth about domestic violence. Victims learn how to mask danger. They learn how to function inside fear. Survival often looks like normalcy from the outside. Meanwhile, Michael was alone with his thoughts, and when someone like him is left alone after losing control,
that what happened did not involve an outside intruder. Authorities examined recent events, legal records, and personal history. A clearer picture began to emerge. The investigation pointed to a full example of what can happen when a mental health crisis is not recognized or treated in time. Family case sent shockwaves far beyond Utah. It sparked difficult conversations about mental health, family intervention, and whether existing systems are equipped to prevent tragedies like this. Many asked the same questions. Could this have been prevented? Were the warning signs missed? And what responsibility do we all share when someone is clearly struggling? This case now stands as a reminder: silence does not always mean safety. The Haight family tragedy reminds us that danger doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes the greatest risks develop quietly.
she described being choked, shaken, slammed into furniture. She said she was afraid she would stop breathing, afraid he would kill her. Those words were recorded, those statements were documented, those fears were real, and yet no charges were filed, no protective orders issued, no follow-up conducted. Michael Hay was warned and sent home. The case was closed. For the next 3 years, life appeared to continue. But abuse doesn't disappear when it's ignored. It evolves, it tightens, it waits. Tasha stayed, the children stayed. So when January 4th passed without a word from her, concern turned into fear. A family member made the call. Officers were dispatched to the brick home on North Albert Drive just after 4 p.m. They had been married for nearly 20 years. They met while attending Southern Utah University, married young, built a family, and settled into what appeared to be a quiet, respectable life. Their children were involved in school, church, and community activities. Family photos showed smiles, holidays, togetherness. Tasha's elderly mother, Gail Earl, lived with them, helping with the kids and offering support. Behind those walls, fear had been living there for a long time. 2 weeks before the murders, something changed. Tasha filed for divorce, quietly, without drama, without public confrontation. Court documents would later confirm that she initiated the separation. That detail matters more than most people realize, because statistically, the most dangerous time for a victim of domestic abuse is not when they stay, it's when they try to leave. Friends and family would later say Tasha was scared. She told them Michael had removed all the guns from the home. To outsiders, that might sound like a safety measure, but Tasha felt exposed. She and her mother were trained with firearms. They understood protection, and now that protection was gone. Her fear wasn't irrational, it was prophetic. 3 years earlier, police had already been inside that house. Not for an argument, not for a misunderstanding, for a child. In August 2020, officers responded to a call reporting possible violence inside the Hay home. What they heard that day should have triggered immediate intervention. The family's eldest daughter, just 14 years old, told investigators that her father had been assaulting her for years. She described being choked, shaken, slammed into furniture. She said she was afraid she would stop breathing, afraid he would kill her. Those words were recorded. Those statements were documented. Those fears were real. And yet, no charges were filed, no protective orders issued, no follow-up conducted. Michael Hay was warned and sent home. The case was closed. 3 years earlier, police had already been inside that house, not for an argument, not for a misunderstanding, for a child. In August 2020, officers responded to a call reporting possible violence inside the Hay home. What they heard that day should have triggered immediate intervention. The family's eldest daughter, just 14 years old, told investigators that her father had been assaulting her for years. She described being choked, shaken, slammed into furniture. She said she was afraid she would stop breathing, afraid he would kill her. Those words were recorded, those statements were documented, those fears were real, and yet no charges were filed, no protective orders issued, no follow-up conducted. Michael Hay was warned and sent home. The case was closed. For the next 3 years, life appeared to continue. But abuse doesn't disappear when it's ignored. It evolves, it tightens, it waits. Tasha stayed, the children stayed, hope stayed, the belief that maybe things would improve, that confrontation had scared him enough to change. That belief would cost 8 people their lives. The call didn't come in as an emergency. No one reported gunshots. No one reported screaming. No one reported violence. It was a welfare check. the kind police receive every day, a quiet request asking officers to make sure someone was okay because they hadn't shown up where they were supposed to be. On the surface, it sounded routine, but to the people who knew Tasha Hay, this was anything but normal. She didn't miss appointments, ever. So when January 4th passed without a word from her, concern turned into fear. A family member made the call. Officers were dispatched to the brick home on North Albert Drive just after 4 p.m. What they found inside would follow them for the rest of their careers. When officers entered the home, the silence was immediate and oppressive. No movement, no television, no sound of children. The kind of stillness that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels wrong. Room by room, they searched. Then they found the bodies. 8 people, all deceased. Tasha Hay, her mother, Gail Earl, 5 children, teenagers, elementary schoolers, and one barely old enough to start school, and Michael Hay, the suspect, the husband, the father. He had taken his own life after killing the rest of his family. For experienced investigators, scenes like this never become routine. But this one was different, not because of the number alone, but because of the ages, the relationships, the sheer intimacy of the violence. This wasn't a crime committed in the dark by a stranger. This was a man who knew every victim by name. Word spread fast. In a town as small as Enoch, there are no secrets for long. Squad cars, crime scene tape, media vans lining the street, neighbors stepping outside, confused, whispering, trying to understand how something like this could happen here. The mayor lived nearby. The children had played in his yard. Families recognized the house, recognized the names. This wasn't a headline from somewhere far away. This was their street, their church, their children's classmates. And as officials confirmed the details, disbelief turned into grief. At a press conference the following day, law enforcement confirmed what many already feared. There had been prior contact with the family, not recently, but significantly. When asked about it, officials spoke carefully. They acknowledged an investigation years earlier, but insisted there had been nothing ongoing, no active cases, no immediate red flags, at least not ones they said they were aware of at the time. But documents would later tell a very different story. In 2020, Macy Hay was just 14 years old when she spoke to police. What she described was not vague, it wasn't exaggerated, it was specific, detailed, and consistent with known patterns of escalating domestic violence. She described being choked until she feared she would stop breathing. She described being slammed into furniture. She described years of abuse that began when she was barely 11 years old.